Hi, Ramona. So I just have a question I want to ask about consumer dispute. With winter sales approaching, shops across London are getting busier. It's exciting and it's a bit overwhelming to see so many wish list items on sale. But what happens if the price on the tag is incorrect, especially if it's much lower than the intended sales price? Should the retailer honor the mistake or does the responsibility lie with customer?
Hi, thank you for your question. This is a very good and interesting topic. So, I would like to start by saying that in English contract law, you have certain elements that form a contract. You have the offer, you have the acceptance, you have the consideration, that is the money paid for the good. And then you have the intention to create legal relations. And the presence of these elements, all these elements, shall I say, is necessary to establish that the contract has been formed. And if a contract has been formed, such contract must be honored. However, the question is at what point does the retailer spot a mistake? So, for example, if the retailer spots the mistake before the purchase is completed, for example, at checkout, the retailer could generally correct the error and inform the customer that there has been an error and that this was not the correct price for the item. Commercially, the retailer may want to offer any sort of voucher or discount on the item. And at that point, a contract is not formed because you do not have the consideration element. And the retailer is not generally legally bound to sell, let's say, the wool coat for the quoted price. However, if the error is spotted after the payment has been completed, the question is whether the contract has been formed. And in a practical situation, we would look into all the elements of the contract and all the information provided by our client. If it was an obvious pricing mistake. For example, the wool coat that we discussed earlier was supposed to be priced at £1,000. However, the display price is £10, an offer that is too good to be true. Then a reasonable consumer would have arguably been able to note that the price was incorrect. However, if the error was less obvious, for example, a £50 discrepancy on a £1,000 item, in certain situation might be seen as a less obvious mistake, then the consumer will likely argue that it is fair for the retailer to honor the sale. The options for the retailer would be either to issue a refund or honor the sale if that happens after the purchase, after the monies are paid for the item.
Okay, so what option does a consumer have in this situation?
For the consumer, generally speaking, and taking the same example of the wool coat that was priced at £1,000. The intended price was £1,000, but the displayed price was £10. Once notified that the price was £1,000, the consumer can decide to accept or decline to purchase the good at that point. And if that happens after the purchase, the retailer may issue a full refund, and the consumer has the option to accept or reject that full refund. And if the retailer refuses to honor the incorrect price for the item, especially when there is a minor discrepancy, the consumer may want to look into whether the contract has been formed and whether this was a genuine mistake or a misleading practice. And there are numerous laws and regulations on that which apply to specific situations. If you have any questions regarding consumer contracts, you can contact Good Law International for clear, practical advice to resolve your consumer and shopping disputes with ease.